2016 has been a very good year for game releases, but not all games lived up to expectations. In this video, we will be going over the top 10 most disappointing games of 2016 so far. Not all of these games are necessarily bad, but they fell short of what gamers had hoped for. With that being said, let's get right into this. Number 10, Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Mirror's Edge was one of the most underrated games of last generation, and when it was announced that the game would finally see a follow-up in Mirror's Edge Catalyst, people were stoked. Now running on the new consoles and featuring a much bigger world, we were excited to see what Mirror's Edge Catalyst was gonna bring. The story left a lot to be desired, and the combat was rather bad. The latter is more of a shame because Mirror's Edge had so much potential with its combat. The game has its moments, the exploration and gameplay are pretty good, and the visuals are excellent. However, this isn't the refined Mirror's Edge experience we were hoping for.
Not yet.
Well, I'm sure you can work something out. And if not, I'll come with you when you go into exile. We'll own the Grey Lands.
Where you shouldn't be, Legion. We might need backup. Patrol, we have a breacher.
Number 9, Quantum Break. Let me start off by saying by no means is Quantum Break a bad game. It's not, but this was a game that a lot of people, myself included, were really expecting to be a premier Xbox One title that was a system seller. And it wasn't that. The game was developed by Remedy, the guys that made Alan Wake, and just like that game, Quantum Break has a big emphasis on its story. And that part they definitely got right. The gameplay has its issues, and being only a 10-hour story, it ends fairly quickly. Not to mention the PC version is absolutely horrendous, featuring a litany of performance issues. You should absolutely stay away from the PC version of Quantum Break, and the Xbox One version, while it's not the top tier game some of us may have expected, it's still worth your time. Number 8, Battleborn. Battleborn was the latest game from Gearbox Software, the guys that made the Borderlands games. But Battleborn was nothing like those titles. It's an online first-person hero-based shooter with MOBA elements. Might remind you a little bit of Overwatch from that description. Battleborn wasn't terrible in any specific area, but it just felt like an extremely uninspired game. It's fun to mess around with all of the different heroes, but the allure of that wears out quickly. Not to mention that this is an online-only game and the player base has quickly dwindled since launch, and that's a big problem. Number 7, Shadow of the Beast. Shadow of the Beast is a remake of the old school Shadow of the Beast game released on platforms like the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. The remake on PlayStation 4 was looking really good. The combat is visceral, but at the same time it's not as polished as it should be. There's not a lot of depth to the game, and nothing makes the game stand out unless you're a sucker for nostalgia. And sometimes it's better that's kept in the past. Number 6, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutants in Manhattan. Platinum Games has become one of the top developers in the industry today, but at the same time, they've been getting a bit inconsistent. The Legend of Korra was an awful game, and we have another pretty poor licensed game in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutants in Manhattan. We haven't had a quality Turtles game in a long time, and I for one was hoping this would be one, but alas, it was not. The gameplay is incredibly bland with nothing special in any area, visuals are subpar, and the game was very short with little replay value. A great Turtles game, this is not, quite a bad one. Number 5, Tom Clancy's The Division. The Division falls victim to being one of the most anticipated games this generation. When it was announced back in 2013, gamers were enthralled. The game suffered from a few delays and an obvious visual downgrade, but it seemed like the hype of the game had remained. There are elements of Division that are good. The game creates a great ambiance and the multiplayer gameplay is quite good. However, the game becomes very dull. There isn't a lot of variety in what you do, and it doesn't really innovate in looting style games. Even though the game is considered a disappointment by many, it still smashed Ubisoft company records, including the highest number of sales on day one. So at the end of the day, Ubisoft was probably pretty happy with it, but there's definitely room for improvement in a potential follow-up. Number 4, Umbrella Corps. Umbrella Corps is a spin-off to the Resident Evil franchise. It's a multiplayer tactical shooter, and it's the epitome of generic. There's very little content to the game, but even with the content there, it won't keep you engaged to play it for more than a few hours, if that. The design is weak and the sloppy and inconsistent gameplay make Umbrella Corps very frustrating. It's linked to Resident Evil and it doesn't live up to that at all. The market for multiplayer shooters is so competitive and Umbrella Corps just falls behind. Number 3, Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V was the first numbered entry in the series in nearly a decade, and the core gameplay of Street Fighter V is fine, but where the game really fails is its lack of content. This was a full $60 game and there's just not a lot to the game. The single player content was non-existent, basic modes were missing, the roster was sparse. If the game was a $20 or $30 downloadable title, then it would have been fine, but that wasn't the case. More content has been introduced over time, but that doesn't excuse the game from launching at an incomplete state. Number 2, Homefront The Revolution. Homefront was one of the most interesting games of the last generation. It told a very compelling story and had a great tone. Unfortunately, the campaign was extremely short and the multiplayer wasn't anything to write home about. This year we saw a sequel, Homefront The Revolution, this time being set in an open world. The obvious issues lie on the technical side. The frame rate was inconsistent, there was sudden freezing, it was just bad. The gameplay got very stale and the story wasn't even as engaging as the first game. It's unfortunate, but Homefront The Revolution probably marked the end of Homefront. Finally, number 1, Mighty Number 9. To put it simply, Mighty Number 9 was a colossal disappointment. It was kickstarted back in 2013, and when gamers saw that a spiritual successor to Mega Man was on the table, and the project would be led by Keiji Inafune, we flocked all over it. The game was funded with over $4 million, and with that kind of money, you would think that development would go swimmingly, and that it would be a very smooth road to release. That was not the case at all. The game saw several delays, and faith from the gamers was dying. The game was finally released on June 21st, and it wasn't the action platformer we were hoping for. It's extremely repetitive and a lot of the content in the game is rehashed and poorly designed. It's a shame really. Keiji Inafune stated, "I own all the problems that came with this game, and if you want to hurl insults at me, it's totally my fault. I'm the key creator, I will own that responsibility." At the end of the day, the story of Mighty Number 9 is just going to be remembered as very sad. So that wraps up our countdown of the top 10 most disappointing games of 2016 so far. What do you think? Which games disappointed you the most? Let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching and goodbye.